Hello and welcome to Banned Books Conversations, where radical readers discuss prohibited prose. I'm your host, Tonya Todd, and we're here to talk about banned books, literary works that have been removed from a library shelf or school curriculum. Over the course of Banned Books Week, this series will cover 7 different books, the reasons they were banned, and the value in reading them. Today's book is Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. It may surprise you that this book is on the banned books list. It may also surprise you why, but before we get to that, let's meet today's radical readers. Meow Wendy, welcome. Please introduce yourself and tell us a bit about what you do.
Thank you, Tonya. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for having me here. I'm Wendy Wimmer. I am a fiction author by night and a technology editor by day. My most recent offering is Entry Level Short Stories Collection. It's available from Autumn House Press. It won the Autumn House Press 2021 Fiction Award and was just released almost not quite exactly a year ago, actually. Now I'm thinking about it. And recently available also on audiobook on Audible and Libby and Chirp and wherever you get your digital media. So that is me, and I'm excited to be here talking about one of my most favorite books of all time.
Yes, you were very eager when I mentioned this one. Ada, please introduce yourself.
Hi, Tonya. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me on another great year. Well, I guess it's not great since we have to have conversations about banned books, but another year of banned books conversations. My name is Ada McCartney. I'm an actor, poet, and teaching artist with over a decade of experience working in intersections of art, community organizing, and education. I host the Poetry Theater podcast with the Femon Collective and collaborate on publishing projects with the Wisdom Body Collective. And I'm glad to be here.
And Spider Dan.
Hello, Tonya. Hello, everyone. I'm Spider Dan of the Spider Dan and the Secret Balls podcast, where I cover cult movies and comic books that you should be looking at, but probably aren't. So I like to, like an archaeologist, dig out those hidden treasures. And that often includes very controversial films or banned books in their own right. So yes, thank you for having me on. I thought last year was wonderful and a very important series of podcasts to listen to. I think everybody should go back and listen to them if they haven't already.
Well, thank you for that. And in case you don't know, Dan is responsible for all of those lovely reels that were made last year. He was a huge help behind the scenes. And today he's going to join us for the conversation.
I'm so glad. I'm so happy to be here and again talking about more spiders.
Yes. Well, we'll start with you. What is it about banned books, the conversation around banned books that interests you?
I'm always interested. I've never kind of steered away from controversial stuff. If anything, I go towards that because I think that's fascinating, that's interesting. And why is it controversial? What was it? What was it about the time? What was it about the people who weren't happy with it? Why is it deemed controversial? Is it still controversial today? I like that investigation, again, that historical aspect. And I think that banning books is dangerous. I think it can be irresponsible. And I think, I'm a big comic book fan, and I was introduced to the idea of banning and burning books through comic books, through the McCarthyism, and there was a book called Seduction of the Innocent, which it was I think it's Frederick Wortham, I want to say, which is a book that actually probably should have been banned itself because it was full of all absolute rubbish, not even real studies or scientific things. They implied that Batman and Robin were in a homosexual relationship and it was ungodly and various other horrible things. But I just think it's something that we should always keep an eye on and that we should be aware of. Again, I think there are offensive things out there, but I don't think that we should be outright banning them. I think if you are offended by it, put it away, don't give them your money, end of.
How about you, Wendy? What interests you in these conversations?
What I'm most interested about, I've been thinking about this question a lot, What I'm most interested about is generally who gets to do the banning, generally as a very specific but very vocal, tiny little minority, often, repeating the mantra of think about the children, which is always ridiculous because what about the children? Don't they get to think for themselves, and don't they get to, experience, that's really what it is. Think about the children. We want to control what they have experience to. But then I'm also thinking about, and I'm showing my age here. In the 80s, there was a book called Michelle Remembers, which was posed as nonfiction, written by a psychiatrist. Had all the credentials that you would think that this was a real thing, and it was talking about his patients' remembrances of being abused by a satanic cult, and that drove a tremendous amount of satanic panic in the 80s, and then was later completely found to be a sham. He married the woman who it was about, and there was no evidence that any of those things had been true. So we, as kids, we're all sharing this around the school. It was in the school's library. Nobody had banned it or anything, but we believed that it was true. So we were even like getting freaked out about, we'd play music backwards and we'd hear supposedly the voice of Satan in the background. And, we had friends who were playing D&D, and it's like, oh no, those are probably Satanists. And maybe that should have been banned, or maybe it should have been, republished under the clear tome of fiction, because we earnestly believed it was true. And those are the this gray area of, we need to understand what we're getting into when we read a book, but we also need to have the ability to decide for ourselves. When I taught World Lit and I was talking about, the Age of Enlightenment, we were talking about at the time Voltaire and the French writers, and Voltaire was banned as well at the time. He was supposedly lewd. There was a lot of LGBT plus authors who had content that was banned. But then on the flip side, you have the Marquis de Sade, who was writing truly like depictions of child sexual assault, abusive situations. And when I taught World Lit to college students, they were asking me, how come we're not reading, Marquis de Sade? It's in the Norton. And I'm like, well, you know what? Because I've had a lot. I've had enough. And I don't want to have conversations that this would invite, but you're welcome to check this out. Here are the books. They're in the library. Go decide for yourself. So I think that's really this kind of careful, narrow line that we have to walk about making sure that people walk into something understanding what they're getting into without hampering their ability to do so. That was kind of a long, meandering way to say, ban books. Why?
How about you, Ada?
As long as books are being banned and challenged, I feel responsible to keep talking about that to everybody I know, to keep interrogating why, to keep reading books that are banned and challenged. So that's at the heart of my interest in participating in these conversations. Recently, as an educator, I am teaching in a college classroom a book that, while not banned, is frequently challenged for the graphic nature of the illustrations. A lot, more than a few students and other people would have called it pornographic. It's decidedly not pornographic. But I just find it really fascinating that the kinds of criticisms that I field are never about the story itself or about the ideas in it. They're about usually recycled criticisms that they've heard out in the world, or sort of judging a book by its cover or a picture, inspired criticisms. And I think that is, to your point, Wendy, not doing diligence to having the opportunity to really understand and make your own assessments of books, of ideas, of anything. So yeah, as long as books are being challenged and banned, I feel like compelled to talk about them, to read them, to seek them out. Um, Selfishly, at the core of it, to decide for myself, but also so that I can model that for people in my world who can see me doing that.
Are you open to sharing the name of that
Oh
literary
yeah.
work?
It is Fiona Staples and Brian K. Vaughan's Saga. It's a graphic comic series that's a space opera, and it contains depictions of death, sex, violence, war, most contentiously child slavery, assault. So it's not a PG text by any stretch of the imagination. Um, but I am teaching it in an adult context, in a college classroom full of adults. So I feel like that's important context.
Yes.
It's not something that I would have taught when I taught high school, for example.
But you sound very passionate about that. You should probably write an essay.
Ooh, girl. If you're a fan of and you want to read an essay about that, you should check out the anthology that Miss Todd is co-editing, which may or may not contain an essay about this very topic.
April 2024, Four Horsemen Press.
Get it?
So back to our conversation, and we'll stick with Ada for this one because I feel like Dan and Wendy covered it a little bit. Is there a scenario is there a scenario in which you feel banning a book is the correct course of action? And if so, what is it?
No, I don't think that they're really and here's why. I don't think that there's a scenario in which it's okay to ban a book, because where is the line? Who, as Wendy so beautifully put it, who gets to decide? Who has the power to decide what I read, what you read, what we read? And I think it's a very thin line, and I don't think that banning books as a practice is an appropriate or helpful way to deal with some of the challenges posed in texts that might be banned.
How about you, Dan?
I think I I think age ratings for stuff is good. I think just to give you an idea of what you're going into, I think I don't want to call them trigger warnings, but maybe describing some of the stuff that goes on in the book. If you're emotionally vulnerable to those kind of depictions of things like that, maybe some of the stuff Ada was talking about, things like that. If you're not kind of happy reading anything about that, that's your choice. You have the choice, I think, is the option. A banned book implies there is no choice. We don't have access to that text, and I think that's the thing is having the ability to make my own decision. And if I want to read it, I can. If I go halfway through it and I'm offended, I can put it down. I can put it away. But at the end of the day, everybody should have the freedom and the choice to pick up and so there's some books I will never read out there that are highly offensive to me, but I'm not going ban them, get rid of them. I'm going, no, that's it's freedom of speech. It's horrible speech, and I don't agree with it. But if people want to write it, that is their freedom to do so. But yeah, I think it boils down to that for me. If I want to read something, I should have the ability to make that decision for myself.
How about you, Wendy?
Well, I mean, so there's a couple of things that really, when we're talking about banned books, this is an administrative decision through public school systems, right? This is not ever going to affect people who are outside of, getting things from the public library, unless they're banning them at the public library. And I think it's a really interesting discussion. Today is the day that the California Senate is banning school book banning within the public school system. So they're not able to do that, which is kind of amazing. But ultimately, what goes in the library is chosen by whoever the librarian is. So there may be quiet shadow bans happening all the time that we just don't know about, which I think is more concerning. We should be asking, what is being kept out of the library that I don't know about, because nobody has made a fuss. And recently as in yesterday, I was trying to come up with a name for in some fiction that I was working on, for a child who was the result of a sexual assault. And I chose, admittedly, a terrible Google term, not really thinking about it. And Google stopped and asked me if I was human before it would give me the search query. So while I don't believe in banning books, I think that in some instances, as Dan was saying, controls might need to be in place a little bit to be like, hey, do you really know what you're getting here? Like, Lolita isn't just a book about teenage fashion. It's got some heavy stuff in there, and I think that controls might need to be just like, I don't know if it's like a warning label or whatnot, but just a conversation for kids who are maybe picking up something that might be alarming. Like a trigger warning, I think is a great case. Or in like the case of Marquis de Sade, it features child sexual assault. Everybody knows who Marquis de Sade is. He's part of, the lexicon. We talk about him in terms of referencing. So people may think that it's, a classic and pick it up. I've definitely seen that situation from my college sophomores. So that is, we were talking about a slippery slope a little bit. Ada had mentioned, and it does become a question about like how much is censorship. I remember in the 80s, Tipper Gore wanted parent advisory stickers on rock albums. And am I suggesting parent advisory stickers on books? Gosh, I hope not. But at the same time, I think I am. So I don't know. So I have no answer,
Sorry,
Tonya.
you remind me of a Public Enemy lyric where they say, we wore that sticker like a badge.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. That meant the good stuff, right? Like, this is like, oh, yeah. I remember, I think Nirvana's Nevermind, our local store put the sticker over the child's penis specifically. Because there's a baby with a,
Yeah. If you are having feelings because of a naked baby, maybe
right,
you should examine that.
Right. It was like 6 months old. Like, come on. So it is, it does make me wonder about the slippery slope, but at the same time, I do think it can be a conversation without being an actionalized administrative policy. And that's why we hire librarians, right? That's why children's librarians are the treasures that they are. They know what your kids are checking out, and they can have those conversations and make those recommendations.
Well, since you mentioned the slippery slope, how does that concept fit in with the desire to ban books?
I actually think slippery slope is an excuse. I think it's a lot of people were using the slippery slope argument when we were talking about equal rights for marriage and saying, well, what's to stop me from marrying a gerbil? And it's like, well, that would not happen. That is not the same thing. And
consent of the gerbil.
Right. It's a false equivalency. So I feel like the slippery slope argument is just asking us all to be reasonable people and use logic and understand that this is not like that. The apples do not equal oranges.
How about you, Ada?
The logical fallacy that sort of asserts that a relatively small step leads to a larger series of related and possibly catastrophic events, also known as the slippery slope fallacy, seems to be really at the heart and in the foundation of most banning advocacy and most arguments for banning or censoring books and I would say education in larger context. I think that it's at the heart of not only administrative book bans and shadow bans in like libraries, but additionally at the heart of educational censorship that does things like say you can't teach critical race theory or the actual history of slavery in the United States. So I'm so glad you asked about the slippery slope fallacy, and I really do think that it sits right at the heart of what, and it's I think too, more powerfully, it's that hook. It serves that hook purpose for people who may not really care that much or may not necessarily be vehement about a particular book banning or censorship cause, but it offers that kind of like hook of a cause or a reason or like a big deal, somebody who could get behind if they're not necessarily doing their own research, or they want to get behind it. I think it's a slippery slope.
Well, I have to give credit to Veronica Clash. She is the one who came up with that question. She was thinking about it ahead of all of the recordings, and she suggested it. Like, that's a good question. What are your thoughts on that, Dan?
I've heard the slippery slope argument from both sides. So I've heard, if we start banning books, it's a slippery slope, and then also if we don't start banning these things, it's a slippery slope. So I think it's used as an argument for both sides. I'm not for banning books in any stretch of the imagination, but you do hear it. I think there are restrictions, and we see in many countries, in many areas of the law, there are strict restrictions on, let's say, the trans issues or the LGBT plus stuff. There's laws that come in and out all the time. There's abortion rights that have been taken away. There are freedoms that are going, if we're not careful. I think there is, it's a difficult question. I think there might be some fruit to it in some respects, like, oh, it's going to be 1984 one day and we can't have independent thoughts. But then could we really let it get that far? Would we let it get that far? But then I don't know. It's a very loaded question for me, I think. But yeah, I think I don't know if it's a valid or invalid way of. I think the hook aspect, I think, is correct. I think that's spot on. That it gets people interested in the issue. It gets people kind of, oh, what's this? What's this now? What are they doing now? These liberals, and all this, what are they taking away from us now? What can't I say now? So yeah, it's a tough one. I don't know if I not quite sure how I feel about it 100%, but maybe I'll get back to you one of these days when I've finally figured it all out.
Well, in recent years, there's been a pattern in the themes that get books banned. And I'm curious what you all think this pattern says about where we are as a society. And I'll start with Ada.
I was worried you'd start with me.
Well, you're freezing, so maybe we'll start with Wendy.
Only worried uh, 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 because
You're breaking
I love this question. And yeah. Am I back?
Go ahead, Wendy.
Can you repeat what was the question?
It was about the pattern of the themes that are getting banned and what it says about where we are as a society.
It's pretty clear to me that themes, and Dan had alluded to it earlier. It tends to be the quote unquote woke material that is being challenged and banned, rather than things that are on, more on the conservative side that are, literal trash. But what I'm mostly concerned about is they are banning it. I mean, like the Barbie movie was, people were complaining about the Barbie movie because it was quote unquote woke thoughts. We're going to inject you, and apparently the reason that Elon Musk purchased a social media conglomerate is because his daughter is trans, and he believes that she got that idea from that social media. Um, the whole thing is crazy, but I think that it does. We are in some kind of major change with um, at least in the U.S. But I mean, I'm seeing it in England as well, and as in Brazil, we had a tremendous, for sure in the U.S. we had a tremendous surge forward in terms of equality and representation in the aughts and the in the early teens, and then it's like we had a rubber band snap backwards where then we went the populace or that 5 to 10% of undecided voters swung the other way and brought us into this almost new moral puritanical uh, vibe, for lack of a better word. And I think that we're going to swing the other way again. I feel like there's enough resistance and enough momentum for all of us to continue to challenge and continue to stand up for our rights individually, bodily, across all of representation, and fight for people who are being marginalized. But it does require us to challenge them, and sometimes maybe even using some of the same tactics that the other side does, which is to be vocal and to be clear about what is not okay, and stand up for those situations. But I do think that, I mean, the it's always been conservatives challenging with books that they think of are too liberal. I mean, it's just, I can't. I remember Judy Blume's Forever was banned when I was in high school too, and it was like it was all because it showed a 16-year-old having safe sex with her boyfriend, safe monogamous missionary style sex, and that was considered to be beyond the pale in my high school. And of course, everybody had to then go down to B. Dalton Books and buy Forever. And I hope Judy Blume got very rich off of that ban. So conservatives are always going to conservative, I think, is really what it comes down to.
So Ada has returned. Let's see if her audio is working.
Hi. Wendy, you must have grown up in the Midwest. I remember.
I did, correct.
Similar conversations in high school. So what do the pattern of books being banned say about the themes of society today? I recently saw this excellent, it was like a 5-minute video. It was Ta-Nehisi Coates talking, and he had this just lucid reminder that like this is not new. It's embedded in the fabric of our history for as long as the United States has been a country, and even longer because y'all over in the UK are the ones that essentially colonized us. So and I thought that was really heartening is the word that comes to mind, even though I don't think it's the best word. It's not heartening that this is a fact of existence to me. It is heartening in that sometimes it can feel like the moment that we are in as a society is gloomy and tragic and unprecedented, and also there's a lot of things that are happening that I think I find it heartening when I can look sort of with a wider and larger lens into history, into the wider context, to see that while it may feel extreme to me right now in this moment as a person only living in this moment, there's a precedent, there's a history, there's a whole context for what we're seeing right now. And so I think that pattern maybe just says that we're still working it out as a society, and we've got a ways to go, perhaps. But I don't necessarily take it too much deeper than that, because I'm trying to, at least for my own sanity, I try to kind of keep an eye on the long game, so to speak.
Well, that answer was definitely worth the wait. How about you, Dan?
I'm going to quote Billy Joel. We didn't start the fire. We didn't start the fire. It's always been burning since the world's been turning. So yeah, I think there's always going to be that clash, and I think what Wendy was saying, there's going to be an equal negative reaction to the positive reaction, and vice versa. It's always going to be those two kind of sides of the coin. I think that are going to be vying for attention. But I know that like like the right wing kind of side of things are always, they're complaining about cancel culture. It's all about, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that. I was like, you started cancel culture way back when. We didn't call it cancel culture, but you were burning books and banning books and saying people can't do this, they can't do that. That's un-American, that's ungodly. We didn't, the left didn't do that. That was a right wing thing, really, in so many ways. So I think it's right. I think we have to. Wendy's right. We have to kind of keep that fight and maybe use some of that ammo. Maybe be a bit more angry and outspoken and get the attention, as opposed to just going, oh, please don't do that. I don't like when you do that. I think maybe sometimes we do need to be righteously angry. I think, and I think we have a right to be. I think when horrible things are going on, recently I've lost friends that have certain views, and I've spoken to family members that have certain views, and it's very upsetting to me. And and the way maybe some children are being raised in my family, I don't necessarily agree with, and maybe some of the views that the parents have as well. It's disheartening, it's sad, and I am always trying to kind of just move the needle, thread the needle to just a little bit to the other side, or to one way or another, just to kind of go ask those questions and go, what do you think? Why are we doing this? Or why do you think this way? Instead of just going, this is the way it is and that's how it's going to be. And yeah, so I think we've got to keep that fire burning in a sense, within ourselves and in society, to make sure the needle doesn't go all the way to one way or to the next. But yeah, couldn't agree more with what Ada and Wendy have been saying.
Well, Wendy, you said that when Judy Blume was banned, everyone raced out to buy that book. What do you think is the value in reading books that may be considered offensive by some?
Well, doesn't it really set you to question whether the people who are quote unquote banning books or preventing your school system from purchasing it, or taking them out of the libraries, doesn't it really set you to realize, like, what is their agenda? What did they have out of it? I mean, literally, it was like less than 3/4 of a page of sex on Judy Blume's Forever. And it wasn't especially good or racy or anything like that. It was literally straight, PIV, boring sex. It was not especially titillating. It was much more about, the realistic annoyances of finding condoms, and I seem to remember, like, there was just a terrible breakup. Spoiler alert for this 40-year-old book. And which brings, I mean, I still think about the banning of Charlotte's Web, not to come back to that, but I mean, that is just ridiculous. And I'm really glad that I was able to experience it on its own merit and its own kind of come to it on its own platform without having a second thought about the reasons behind that banning. I was able to just appreciate it for the wonderful, magical story that it is. So in some ways, it does create a taint for that author's book. And this is E.B. White. E.B. White wrote Strunk and White's, The Elements of Style. I mean, a masterful writer. He did nothing without intention. I feel bad for the kids who knew it was banned before they read it.
Yeah, there is something to that. Dan, what do you think is the value in reading books that might be considered offensive?
I think there are maybe certain topics you could learn from. I think you can have your perspective changed. You can look at something and, maybe you've not experienced something yourself, be it a good thing, a positive thing, or a negative thing. But I think you can get a view that you might not necessarily have gotten. Like, again, have the conversations, talk about these things. Talk about this with your mum, with a friend, with get everybody else's view on it. Oh, what about this topic, or this happened in this book, what's this about? I don't quite understand what this is, or I want to unpack my feelings and try and find a new way to be in touch with the world and reach out and learn things and be open to experiences, good and bad. I look at some very strange films in my podcast, and I have people have introduced me to strange films. I've introduced them, and oftentimes the film might not be great, but the experience we have on the podcast talking about it was actually more beneficial. And there's some dodgy stuff and some weird stuff and some wacky stuff, but I find almost more joy in having talked about it and discussed it, and we go very deep. There's very in-depth conversations I have on my podcast, and talking about society and history and when this film came out, what was it saying, what was it in response to, what was it doing. And I think those are very important conversations to have and to bring things to light, much like the banning of these books. I think this is a very important podcast to do that. And again, it's opening the discourse, it's opening people's, it might be an uncomfortable topic to talk about or discuss, but through the lens of fiction, or a fictionalized version of someone's real life, or something, or inspired by real life, could potentially change your life. You don't know what book, your next book, is going to change your life, or how it's going to remind you of something, or cry, or what have you. You introduced me to a period drama not so long ago, and I think it's one of the best films I've ever seen. It's a beautiful, gorgeous film. And again, you talked about it on our podcast. And again, I would never have watched that. I would never have even in my life gone, period drama. Again, nothing against period dramas necessarily or anything like that. Not necessarily my bag, but I made the choice because of your impassioned speech about the film. I went out and I watched that, and I'm a better person for having watched that.
You have to share what it is.
It was Belle, I believe it was Belle. Am I right?
Yes.
Yes. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful film. And again, it's historical, it's true, and it has so much to say about today's society as much as it did back then. Really wonderful. Go and check it out. I'll recommend it instead of Tonya. I'll recommend it. Wonderful, wonderful film. So yeah, but there you go. There's my example. Be open to experiences and things that you wouldn't necessarily be open to, or you get out your comfort zone. Get out of your comfort zone. I think these films, these can, and I've covered some films where it's like, oh, there's actual animal cruelty going on in these films. I don't like that. I really don't like that. But I'm watching it because I think the discussion will be richer for that. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it to people. I will let them fully know what goes on in there as a trigger warning. I'll go, if you watch this is going to happen. You're going to see this. If you're not up for it, if you're not comfortable with it, and I put a few warnings on my podcast because a lot of people watch along with these films or the comics that I read, and I was very clear about what goes on in this film and whether they were ready for it. And some people, 2 or 3 people, went, no, I am going to watch that because it does sound interesting and I want to know what Dan's talking about. I want the context for this. And again, they wouldn't recommend the film either, but at least they took the chance and gave it a go.
And you give them an opportunity to prepare themselves for the material too.
Absolutely. I try and do that more often than I did. Once, not so long ago, I didn't. I probably should have gave them a bit more fair warnings, but I've learned my lesson.
Really? Spoiler Dan wasn't giving spoilers?
Not spoilers, but yeah, there's again more animal cruelty that I kind of forgot about in a different film. But
I will say that's the one kind of spoiler that I welcome.
Okay.
I need to know ahead of time.
I will let you know. I will let everyone know. Just don't tell Mike of Genuine Chit Chats, Megan, what the film's about, because I think it might upset her. So we'll just mum's the word on that one.
Yes.
But yes.
Ada, do I need to repeat the question?
I don't think so.
Okay.
The value, Dan, you put it beautifully. For me personally, I find great value in reading and watching things that I am offended by, because it offers me the opportunity to have a richer understanding of what offends me and why. And this is coming up a lot right now in the course I'm teaching around that book saga, as it usually does. But this idea that there are, to go back a little bit to the pattern and kind of where we are as a society, for a number of reasons, there are fewer and fewer public social forums where we intentionally get together to talk about things that we disagree on, that could be controversial, that make us uncomfortable. And so I see evidence of this every term, every time we have this discussion of how valuable it is to put ourselves in this space of engaging with material that makes us uncomfortable, that offends us, and to talk about it with people who feel differently about it. I think that civic discourse is an essential life skill, and that's why I absolutely think that there's value in reading books that are offensive to some or to many. And to that end, the content warning, at least in this educational context, and for me as a reader or viewer, serves as like an opportunity to kind of prepare myself emotionally and mentally for what I'm about to engage with. And in the cases of, like, if there's animal cruelty or certain other things, okay, I'm going to skip this bit. I'm going to do this to take care of myself. As opposed to an invitation to just kind of disengage and say, well, and I use the term content warning instead of trigger warning, because I do want to warn you about the content of what we're about to read and discuss, but I don't think it's fair to assume that you will be triggered by it, nor to give you the opportunity to use being triggered as an opportunity to opt out of the discussion, which is a little bit different in like an everyday context, but I find that useful outside of the classroom as kind of like a checkpoint for myself as a reader and viewer when I'm engaging with things, people, material, media that I find offensive.
You introduce a bias with the word trigger.
Mm-hmm.
So content warning, that's a good suggestion. So we're going to focus on today's banned book because I can tell Wendy is itching to start discussing this book. Published in 1952 by author E.B. White, the award-winning Charlotte's Web is about the friendship between a pig named Wilbur and a spider named Charlotte. This popular children's book has been consistently on the best-selling hardcover list for decades. Wendy, how old were you when you first read this book?
I was 7 years old, tiny little Wendy. And I still have my copy, although I couldn't find it. It's the front cover is has separated, and I just kind of keep it there by will. I keep just storing it there. I don't want to repair it for some reason. I just want to like make sure it's by it. And it's the one with the Gareth Williams, who did all the Little House books, does the illustrations for that copy. It's a tan or beige copy. If for those of you who are of a certain age or had hand me down books or vintage books, the paperback, and it was just wonderful. And Charlotte was absolutely beautiful in the illustrations. Who
How about
doesn't
you,
want
Ada?
their own Charlotte? I'm sorry, but who doesn't want their own magical spider?
Right? Thank you,
Yes.
Wendy. I couldn't have been more than 8. I might have been 7. And it was that same the same edition that was illustrated by the guy that did the Little House on the Prairie series. And it was every night my mom would sit down and we would read before bedtime. And Charlotte's Web was one of the books that we read together. My mom and me and my little brother, who's 2 years younger than me. So he would have been, I don't know, 5 or 6 when he experienced Charlotte's Web. And my mom and I would take turns reading the text and talking about the pictures. And it's been one of my favorite and most formative reading experiences of my life.
That sounds very lovely. Just that type of memory and reading together and teaching your brother with your mother.
It was beautiful. I am so grateful to my mom for that tradition in childhood, and my dad too. He would sometimes read to us. But it was really kind of our thing. And Charlotte's Web, I think I remember it so vividly because while we had read other books, maybe it was something about the age I was, but it affected me emotionally more than any like thing except the Velveteen Rabbit that I had read up until that point. And I remember we just when we got to the sad parts, we just cried. All 3 of us were there crying together over this book. And I just think that was so valuable. I mean, I'm not going to call it fun because it wasn't necessarily fun, but it was essential. And I obviously remember it to this day. Yeah.
How about you, Dan? How old were you when you first read it?
I was the innocent and tender age of 35. So I'd never read this, but I was familiar with it. I know we must have studied it in school because I think that's the only place I would have learnt about it. I'm dyslexic, so in my younger years, I wasn't really an avid reader, I would say, unless they had pictures. But obviously, this does have pictures, so that's why I picked this one. No. But I knew it enough. I knew the kind of some of the. I think we must have watched the animated version. I think because we might read a passage or a chapter in school, and then we'd probably just watch the movie. I think. So I was familiar with it, and there was some things I'd forgotten about it, but I remembered through reading. I did the whole thing, all of the pages, just in like the last couple of months, really. Very slowly, but dedicatedly read every single word. So 35.
So you experienced this as an adult first. What were your emotional reactions?
You know what? This felt like a kind of I described when we did Ladybird on the podcast. I described that as quite a nourishing film, like for the like soul food, and I feel like this is the same. And I was, to be honest, I see our relationship quite similar to you're definitely the Charlotte to my Wilbur, I think. And I appreciated that. I liked that, and I liked the kind of the simple nature, the simple farm life.
He just likes when I say he's terrific.
I do like that. I do like that.
Better than some pig.
Yes.
Some
Dan.
Some sexist pig.
Oh, stop.
I enjoyed it. It was fun. It was charming. It reminded me of kind of when you would go to a farm as a kid and the wonder and the magic of all these kind of creatures doing their own thing, and that kind of simple farm life. I actually didn't look up when it was written, and I was like, this is as relevant today as it was when it was made. Like, there's not really anything that dates it. I didn't, there wasn't like a moment where I'm like, oh, this is really really dated. This could still happen now. You could start the farm, and You can still have the fairground and the prizes and that sort of thing. And yeah, no, I felt it is something I would read to my child, I think, because there's it's again not necessarily in my wheelhouse of my interests, but I knew of it enough. I knew enough about it. Why, when you suggested it, I was like, when you suggested it, I also went, what would they possibly ban this for? It was also my interest a little bit.
Yeah, we'll get to that.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure we will. I'm sure we will. But yeah, no, I as an adult, I think obviously Ada and Wendy have such lovely childhood important memories. And I'll treasure this. I'll treasure the act of reading this and enjoying this. And again, it's simple. Um, just the charm of it, just the simple, and not, when I say simple, it's not derogatory. It's just good storytelling and done effectively. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. Even as a jaded 35-year-old, I thought it was wonderful.
Wendy, what emotional reactions do you recall having when you read it?
Well, I was at the time, we had just moved away from a farm. We lived on a farm. And so I was eagerly reading anything farm related. We didn't have pigs, we had horses and geese and ducks, but we also had barn rats. And I did not, I really appreciated the depiction of Templeton, who was kind of a jerk, because our barn rats were gross. And I kind of had a similar, don't kill my duck moment, because I had ducks and rabbits, and my stepfather was a hunter. So it was probably the beginning or the understanding of, like meat in the relationship to what we eat, and where that comes from. And even to this day, I don't eat goose or duck or rabbit. For those, and I actually don't eat pork, not related to Charlotte's Web, but I haven't eaten pork in 14 years. And much of it is the same way, though. It's that connection with, the value of a human life. I think that was kind of that seminal moment of which life is valuable. And here Charlotte is a spider that we would kill without even thinking, if she were in our house. And she had the ability to save a life, and through using her talent, which, such as it was, just really such a moment. And I think it really resonates for children, that they're small like a spider, and they have the ability to, use propaganda to enforce their will upon the world. It is the power of propaganda, isn't it? A little bit. But yeah, don't we all want a friend like Charlotte, who is a wordsmith and can change a mind? So that's what I remember thinking about, was also just like the whole circle of life. It has this, no spoiler alert on the 70-plus-year-old book, but it has the wonderful moment when Charlotte is getting older and slower. I'm going to start crying. And it's just wonderful.
There is that moment that I don't remember which of the wives said this, but there's like, he's some pig. Well, it sounds like it's some spider.
She was some spider.
Yes. Like, yes, exactly. Some spider.
Leave it to a woman to recognize the real woman behind the job.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. I had that moment. Like, yeah, she's the one who knows what's happening here. Mm-hmm. And she's just, that was the 1950s element. However, E.B. White understood it. He recognized the wife would understand. She would get it. Ada, do you have anything to add to your emotional experience? You kind of covered it.
I did. Although Wendy, what you said about the farm resonated. I grew up farm adjacent and we always had animals, everything from chickens, rabbits, various strays of various birds, whatnot. And I remember Charlotte's Web was one of the first and most validating experiences that just confirmed my childhood knowing that sentience was beyond humans, and my friendships with the various little creatures that were not human was totally valid, and that my understanding of their sentience and my respect of it was necessary. And I think that's one of the most that the because it's a work of fiction, because it's a children's book, and not like uh you know, this sort of, to glom onto that propaganda element. It's not necessarily propaganda in that it's saying, remember that trees have feelings, remember that, spiders have feelings, but it, goes right to the emotional core of that. And it's stayed with me.
Yeah, it shows you the message. It doesn't tell
Mm-hmm.
you. Well, when I presented the options for this year's conversations, Ada, you and you too, Wendy, you both immediately leapt toward this one. And I think you've kind of shared a little bit why, but do you want to expand on that, Ada?
Yeah, I'd love to. Um, it shocked me that it is either banned or challenged. When I saw it on your list, I thought, no way, this can't be the same Charlotte's Web that I remember. So I, of course, I went to Google and I, went down the little rabbit hole and was like, just like blown away to learn that it has been banned, and to learn why. And I just thought, wow, what an opportunity to reread this book and talk about it, and how ridiculous. um so that's why I leapt toward Charlotte's Web when you offered the options.
How about you, Wendy? Why did you leap toward it?
I came ready to fight with anybody who wanted to ban it. I was ready to get hoppita moppita and all up in somebody's grill who's going to defend it. But I can't think of anybody who would defend maybe the banning of Charlotte's Web. And also, I just think so often in literary culture, children's book and especially chapters books are not appreciated for the literary merit that they have. What E.B. White is doing in, what is it, 20,000, 25,000 words, is really exceptional. We have these characters that, we can remember. We're going to remember Fern and Avery and Henry Zucker and Wilbur and Charlotte and Templeton and the goose and the ewe. We're going to remember them forever. And it taught, well, at least for me and Ada, it taught us empathy, and it reestablished our understanding. It was doing what good literature does, which is teaching us how to feel and modeling a learning experience, but also doing it so wonderfully. I actually use when I'm teaching creative writing and talking about how to start a story.
Yeah, how evocative is that first sentence?
Well, and that's the thing. So normally we have a rule in writing fiction, like don't start your fiction, don't cold open with dialogue. And E.B.
Right.
White's like, yeah, well, watch me. And cold opens with, where's Papa going with that axe? And how much conflict is wrapped into that? Because wherever he's going, it's nowhere good. Things are some shit's going down. And it's just so succinct, and we are hooked. We're in, because of course we're going to flip the page. Where is Papa going with that axe? And Fern's going to save a pig. Oh, I'm in for the long haul at this point. We got to find out, because he's going to he may stop today, but what if he doesn't stop tomorrow? What if when she goes to school, etc. It's so, he keeps raising the action, and it's just a wonderful, just a wonderful example of what you can do. And again, the man is a master. He wrote, elements of style. You should never discount him. But I think it's just a great example of part of the American canon of great literary work, and it doesn't get enough respect. So that's why I jumped in.
And Dan, you were a little less passionate, but still decided in your choice. What compelled you to choose Charlotte's Web?
Well, I wanted to keep the spider theme going, and
That's fair.
got to keep it going. So I again, I said about a little bit about it earlier. It was the kind of familiarity with some familiarity I had with it. I knew it, but also like, how could this harmless children's story be banned? What is it about this story? Is it, is it the way it kind of introduces things like death, the loss of innocence, the way we grow up, the way we change? I think I kind of know what it is, and I'm sure we'll get into it. But I also just thought, how ludicrous. Like,
So were those your assumptions before you read the book or before looking it up? Were those your assumptions about why it was banned?
Um, I much like Ada, I went down a rabbit hole immediately because I was like, I can't just sit on this. I can't not know. Spoilers for myself. I can't not know why it was being banned. So again, I was like, what could it possibly be? Is it orphan children? Maybe, again, no spoilers, but is it something like that? Is that upsetting for children? Is again, death upsetting? Maybe I could kind of, maybe something in there. I was like, what could it possibly be? So then I again fell down that rabbit hole, and if anything, I was kind of angry and confused, and there was so many things I was like, but what what but what? Like, it was just, there was just so many things going on, and I was like, the second I read that, I was like, I'm sticking with this choice because I think this will make for a fascinating discussion, but also I think it will, the kind of other books you've chosen. I think this one is a great choice in between all the middle of that, because people are gonna, I think everyone's gonna see the title and go, what? And they're gonna want to listen. They're gonna want to see and find out exactly why this was banned.
So Ada, did you make any assumptions before you looked into it?
My immediate assumption was the like mature themes of death and as if kids aren't cognizant of and don't have to deal with death all around them all of the time. So that, I think that was probably my core assumption before there wasn't a lot of time between seeing it on the list and going down the rabbit hole of Google, but that was what came to mind before that happened.
How about you, Wendy? Did you make an assumption?
I think I thought it was from the pork industry. Like pork lobbyists.
Yeah, that's
no humanizing of
I could see that.
I could too.
I mean, that's a really good guess. So now we'll finally share with people what the reason is. And there are multiple reasons. In 2003, the book was banned. It was preemptively banned in West Yorkshire, England, because the school's head teacher decided that all books featuring pigs, including Winnie the Pooh and the Three Little Pigs and Charlotte's Web, should be removed to avoid offending Muslims, proving the danger in well-intended ignorance. And
about
then some people just, to me, it's ignorance about being a Muslim. Like, it doesn't mean you hate pigs and can't read literature with a pig in it. It's just the Muslim organizations there were like, well, thank you for your misguided attempt, but we're fine. Please put the books back in the schools. Like, don't put this on us.
What I said to you when you told me that was, bless their heart.
Yes, that's the exact right response. It's just bless their heart. And
no
then
pigs were eaten in the making of this book.
Right. And then some people did take offense to the fact that Charlotte dies, which is a point that E.B. White was adamant about keeping in every adaptation. And then more recently, the book was banned here in the US when a Kansas City parent group claimed that talking animals are unnatural and blasphemous, as humans are the highest level of God's creation. And I would argue that this ban proves otherwise. What are your thoughts on the reasons it was banned? And we'll start with Dan.
So speaking of Yorkshire, I have a friend who he used to edit films on planes, and he was editing a Spider-Man cartoon, and he said in their guidelines, not guidelines he set, but in the guidelines he had to work by, no depiction of any pigs. So they have to cut out Spider-Ham, the pig, completely out of anything. And again, not his guidelines, just something he thought it was quite strange as well, but he had to just go with that. But and he's from Yorkshire, he's from Wakefield, so so that's interesting. Um, I think it's utterly, again, ludicrous. I'll use that word, ludicrous, because it is. I don't know if they've thought about parrots at all, if they with this thinking that they can mimic human speech. So that's a God-given ability to parrots and birds of that kind. Apes are able to communicate via sign language. So do we now, lock them away and say they're not God's creatures or creations or worthy of God's love,
Dolphins can mimic human speech too.
Correct. There you go. There you go. So it's just it's so closed-minded an argument. It's just like, oh well, yeah, like every cartoon has some sort of anthropomorphic animal. So your spider hams, your babes, your all of these kind of animals, like that's half of children's fiction, maybe more. And are they all gone because they talk? Are they?
And this is in the 2000s. This is not like
the enlightened age.
Right. I mean, there have been maybe a few cartoons or books that have talking animals in them. This is not the first one.
Yes. Like when Mickey Mouse came out, was it blasphemous then? No, absolutely not. And it's not blasphemous now. I'm not a religious person. I am, happily agnostic, I think. I did have a friend who is so atheist he made me agnostic, so you can thank him. But I just think it's just closed-minded. Again, what is the agenda? Like Wendy and Ada were saying, what is the agenda behind this? What are they trying to do? What are they trying to say? But it comes across to me that the agenda is just pure idiocy. I mean,
right, because when we're talking about you don't want children to know about death, well, that's laziness. Like, do your job, have a conversation with them. Death exists. You might want to let them know, but banning it because someone who's Muslim might be offended. Like, it's not even, no one's even complained, but just in case, this thread that I've pieced together into something that might happen, we're going to remove it for everyone and blame them, or the ignorance of, oh no, we can't, it's blasphemous to have this kind of book. Like, it's all ignorance, and it's just absolutely incredible to me.
I have a story about it's a secondhand story, but I used to work for a theatre company who would go into schools and they would perform, things like the things they were studying, like Inspector Calls or To Kill a Mockingbird or Shakespeare, what have you. And this company went into to perform To Kill a Mockingbird because they've been studying it for a year, this class. Apparently, earlier in the year, a black student had read the book To Kill a Mockingbird, which has a certain word in it, and he got very upset, very angry, and started kind of tearing up the classroom. The teacher became so terrified and worried that she was going to be cancelled, let's say, let's use that word, that she Tipexed, so she deleted the word from every copy of the school's library. She removed that.
Oh my gosh, that's not the right answer.
No. And then they came to perform the play, they used the word, and the same young man who was, had his issues, and started kind of tearing things up again. And again, it wasn't the rest of the staff, the headmistress, everybody else. They were like, well, why is he kicking off? We've been studying this for the last year. And then she admits that she had been editing the books and editing that word out.
Rather than addressing this issue or his feelings on it, we're going to erase and pretend like it's not a thing.
Exactly. And that's again, the headmistress was not happy. The rest of the staff were not happy. And I think she'd had a conversation with the mother. I think she'd been upset by it as well. But again, I don't think it was, again, the conversation was not had. And that was the problem. And that's what caused the big ruckus during the show. And which is a really poorly handled situation. I think it's because of these situations that unfortunately are being caused because people are censoring, editing, or outright banning these books.
So, Wendy, I know you've been dying to talk about the reasons it was banned. What are your thoughts?
So the interesting thing, the Muslim connection, again, bless her heart. The talking animal connection, I've been thinking about this a lot, and Dan had mentioned, Mickey Mouse and Tony the Tiger and all manner of a million talking animals.
The sexiest Robin Hood in existence.
For real, he didn't wear pants, but and there's just a million, but there's also animals in the Bible that talk. Not just the serpent who was in Eden, but there's at one point there's an eagle in Revelations that is really a messenger, basically a proxy for an angel. So in some ways those animals are divine. So I think that is interesting that I'd be curious to hear how that kind of comes up into it. And also, last I checked, the US was founded on religious freedom. So last I checked, also, it's just not a freaking religious book. I mean, it's not like we're talking about Narnia here, which also has talking animals and is a really big religious allegory. So
yeah,
so that man has written volumes on the defense of Christianity. So we have again, and I also have to say, I still bring up the pork industry because Kansas is the seat of our pork, pork consuming and raising area. So I wonder if the blasphemy, it was just a false
cover
flag operation, and it was really all these pork producing, worried about kids refusing to eat Wilbur on their bacon cheeseburgers. That's my guess. Not really, but I mean, I think people are
okay. But there's some merit to that.
There is some merit to it. Maybe
it's not far-fetched.
We should follow the money. Also, I'm still available to fight. I'm ready to. I'm hopping. I'm ready to go.
Where's Wendy going with that axe?
Wouldn't you like to know?
Ada.
I'm with you, Wendy. Follow the money. I mean, I find it really fascinating that Charlotte's Web was written in 1952, 51, 52, by a man who is renowned for his writing, for teaching us how to write here in the United States. And I just feel like the reasons it was banned take me back to your earlier question, Tonya, about this pattern of where we might be as a society. The first one you mentioned was in 2003. And then, so in the last 20 years, this book that was written in the early 1950s has suddenly got all this controversy around it because animals talk, because we humans have this, what to me is a horrifically offensive idea that we are the most intelligent life form on this planet. Yeah, follow that money right back to the little meat industries. That's what I think about that.
It is very arrogant to presume that we are the top.
It's insane. It's insane. Trees communicate with other trees across hundreds of thousands of miles.
And animals understand what we are saying, and we do not understand what they are saying.
Word.
Sounds smart for me. That's a good play. Well played.
So Scholastic lists this book for the 7 to 10 age group. Is that the age group that you'd recommend as well, Wendy?
Yeah, I would even say, I mean, I think there's some 6-year-olds who could handle it. Chapter books are generally something that they can get into. You know, it it's a classic. But I think it's enjoyable also older than that. I remember reading it as a teenager and also sobbing at the end again because I'm a big schmoopy. But I don't think there is a top age limit. I think that by putting a top age limit, it's limiting. So ages 6 and up.
Yeah. It's a little harder when you reread it because you know what's coming. That sadness lasts a little longer, don't you think?
Obviously, since I just choked up like 30 minutes ago talking about Charlotte.
How about you, Ada? What age group would you recommend this for?
Oh my goodness, that's so true, Tonya. I went into Charlotte's Web already like with my eyes full of tears. When I first picked up the book about a month or two ago to reread it, I was like, this is going to be so sad. I was already like 10 pages in, tears loaded, ready to fall.
It's a muscle memory, right?
I'm with Wendy. I 6 and up. My little brother was probably 5 or 6. It had to be 5 or 6 when we read it. I would have to ask him if there was a profound impact. He is a voracious meat eater, and I know he hunts, so I doubt that it scarred him. It didn't seem like it scarred him. I think 6 and up is totally appropriate, and I'm kind of with you. Putting that age cap on it makes it a little bit less appealing to those tweens and like middle school kids that might really benefit from it. But see that it's, 7 to 10 and think, well, I'm too cool. I can't lower myself to read a book for 7 to 10-year-olds. So yeah, I'd say 6 and up, 7 and up.
What about you, Dan?
I'm not great with children's ages, so I'm just going to base this off my nephew. He is 5, going on 6. I don't think he would sit still um, for that long, and this is not his kind of content. He's very into YouTube and Minecraft, and but he did sit still for the first half an hour of Barbie, which is impressive. So I'll give him that. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe for him, it would be maybe a little too wordy, or maybe it's just not his bag. He's been brought up on these, the Disney Marvel films and stuff. So I think he's been spoilt for all this stuff. So I'd probably say, as going off him entirely, it probably would need to be a little bit older, but not too old. So maybe, yeah, maybe 7 or 8. I think maybe would be a better, maybe roundabout, or maybe a little older for him specifically, I would say.
Well, Ada, what are the reasons that people should read Charlotte's Web?
They are numerous and plentiful. If you are a person who, for any part of your brain, thinks that we are the most intelligent and dominant life force on the planet, we are the most dominant. But if you think we're the most intelligent life form on the planet, I challenge you to read Charlotte's Web and not cry and not change your mind. I'm going to stop there.
How about you, Dan? What are the lessons that could be learned from this book?
Empathy, I think, is always the most important lesson to learn. For whoever they may be, different race, religion, creed, whatever. I think empathy for your fellow man, woman, children, and I think this one just embodies that, and potential, and friendship, and coming to terms with growing old, and changing who you are, becoming more interested in other things as you grow older, and the changing of the seasons, what that does for you, and those simple memories you've had as a child. Um, it's a lovely book, and I can't ever consider or understand, as much as I'd like to. I don't think I could ever understand exactly why they've been banning them. They tried to ban it, but I imagine it's kind of like we were describing, kind of a Texas Chainsaw Massacre situation, where it's like all of the meat industry is going out of business, so they start killing normal people. So maybe that's what we need to do with the people that ban this book. We start taking the chainsaws out to them instead. But yeah, I think there's too many kind of reasons to list. I think.
But you named some excellent ones. Specifically, all of these animals are different races, and yet they could be friends and work toward helping each other.
Yeah,
interspecies empathy.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Even the one that's not really that nice, I still kind of was like, he's all right.
He got a raw deal, but but he still helped, and he was named. Like, he was an important and essential character, and not an antagonist.
I mean, arguably, he's the wordsmith. He brings all the words.
That's right. Wendy, why should people read Charlotte's Web?
Well, 1953 Newbery Award medalist. So folks, further back felt it was worthy. And again, the man who gave us Stuart Little and with the Swan, the Trumpeter of the Swans, something Swan book, also, came from that mind. But
I think it is the Trumpet of the Swan.
Yeah, Trumpet of the Swan. But hey, how about a different reason? It's short. It's short. Put it in your bathroom. It's just a lovely, soothing read. There's a lot of crap going on. We're doom scrolling. It's the antidote to doom scrolling.
The antidote to doom scrolling. There's a sequel for you.
I love that. I'm going to put a copy in my bathroom.
You have your guests coming out crying.
Wouldn't have it any other way.
What happened? Joe's getting tired.
Yes, exactly.
I will say as a sorry, just to interrupt. I will say as a result of this book, there's been 2 instances where I could have killed a spider in the last week, and I didn't do it. So
yeah, Wendy made a comment about that. I don't kill spiders in my house.
I don't either. I find my husband and he comes and gets them and relocates them.
Right. They can stay if they're harmless, or they can be relocated outside. And I've actually kept some as pets.
Although I have to say, I don't know if you guys can see it. Spider bite.
Yes.
Oh. I'm just hoping one of them is, genetically modified or radioactive of some kind one day. You never know. You never know.
Worth it, right?
Totally.
Well, before we wrap up, I believe, Dan, you have some audience comments to share?
I do. Thank you for asking. So I put the word out there very recently just to ask if anybody has any memories of Charlotte's Web, how they felt about it, and also if they knew it was banned, and do they know the reason, and what do they think of the reason why it was banned. So Mike of Genuine Chit Chat, so Mike Burton, he says, no idea why it was banned, but if it's to do with the animals talking, that's nuts. As it isn't that almost every kid's movie, series, or book. Thought that's considered cute? Question mark. Unless it's Animal Farm, of course. Good book, but obviously quite mature. Brackets. Also, would these people ban certain primates from existence as they can learn sign language? I hope it doesn't stem from the devil posing as a talking snake in Eden, as that reason would just be insanity. My friend Natasha Bolton, who I used to go to uni with, a fellow actor, she just says, I loved Charlotte's Web. And then Megan, so Grits Gets Fit on Instagram, Megan Gritty, she says, I don't understand why it would be banned. In my view, Charlotte's Web is a great opportunity for children to learn about friendship and chosen family, whilst also having to understand the concepts of some trickier issues, such as death. It is a wholesome and well-rounded book. And then we have Math. So that's at MathUK78 on Twitter. He was on my latest podcast, lovely fella. He says, I think it's an absolute joke. I think it has a great story to tell, never to give up, and how to try and find who you are. The fact that it's talking animals, well, what about Animal Farm or most Disney films? It's a joke. Someone out of touch wanting to ruin other people's enjoyment. And Rhea Carrigan, our favourite, she says, like most banned books, the banning of this one seems wildly inappropriate. The storytelling device of having animals talk is such a great way to get children interested in reading, as well as exploring the themes of the book. Banning it on religious grounds due to the animals talking is at best unhinged and at worst dangerous. I can't imagine being so threatened by a god and book with talking animals that you would think of banning it. It's like these people don't want children thinking for themselves. Winky face. And then finally, Alison Shelton. So that's by Alison Shelton on Instagram. I guess it's banned because of the talking animals, but that is exactly why I loved it.
Some wonderful comments there, and we thank you all for those. And I want to thank my guests for your thoughtful input. Ada, where can people find you and support your work?
Thanks for having me, Tonya. I have loved this conversation with all three of you. You can find me and my work at www.aamccartney.com. Thank you.
How about you, Wendy?
I am, oh gosh, sorry. I am, Oli is very excited too. I am on www.wendywimmer.com. My book Entry Level is available wherever you find books and at your local independent bookstore. They can get it for you, as well as the website www.wendywimmer.com. And send me an email. I'd love to hear from people.
Dan the man.
So you can find me in my own Daniel's web on www.spiderdanandthesecretbulls.com on the World Wide Web. So swing over and you can look at some wacky, weird, controversial, and sometimes even banned films and or comic books. Lots of fun.
Well, that's it for today's conversation. If you enjoyed what you heard, please like, share, comment. Thank you for listening. Thank you for reading. And until next time, be radiant, be terrific, and most importantly, be humble.